I just want to make a point about the free trade agreement. For most of the day, the news has been running, it's a bad thing that the UK pulled that climate material out of our free trade agreement. Well, watching Peta Credlin, I'm saying it is a good thing, and the government here should be applauded, and criticisms to the UK for putting it there in the first place. I want to underscore that point. It is a good thing. Well done, Australia. Let's go to Denmark now with the international panel, though. A recent influx of migrants into Denmark has now changed the policy. They're looking to introduce a work for dolls scheme to counter the growing number of the new arrivals living on welfare. Now, it's a centre-left government, centre-left, led by Prime Minister Peta Credlin, who has announced plans to require 20,000 immigrants to work at least 37 hours per week or lose access to welfare. For their reaction, let's bring in my international panel from Adelaide, host of Corey Bernardi, and from Sydney, co-host of Outsiders, James Morrow. This is an interesting quote from the Danish Prime Minister. As I said, centre-left, and she says, people have a duty to contribute and make themselves useful. For too many years, we've done a disservice to people for not expecting anything of them. And Denmark's often been held up, hasn't it, Corey, as a social policy exemplar on the left. So this move highlights, doesn't it, that recent waves of migration are causing real ructions in the country. Fascinating stuff.
It's fascinating, Peter, but it's also absolutely correct. I mean, the Danish have always had a very compassionate, very open and very tolerant society, but even they recognise that having groups of people where there is no or little expectation that they're going to actually contribute, that they're going to get involved in the workplace and they're going to sit back and take welfare, actually breeds resentment. It is good for the people involved, it is good for the community, and I'd love to see something like that happen over here. And if I may make this one other point, Denmark has been very, very successful in tackling COVID and vaccinations and everything, partly because it reached out to elements of the Muslim community. Their minister there went into the mosques and spoke to them. They've opened the dialogue and they've made the communications necessary. It's only reasonable now that there's an expectation of something in return. And get a job is good for everyone involved, particularly the person who gets one.
Yeah, I think the scourge of open-ended welfare, maybe with the debt levels as they are here in Australia, will be mugged by the reality. We'll see. For the second time in less than a week, Australia has been ordered to abandon coal, James Morrow. This time, researchers from the University College in London say that 90% of Australia's coal must stay in the ground in order to meet net zero emissions by 2050. This is the same UK university in the same country, in the UK, that this week was forced to turn to coal-fired power to save the grid. British researchers are saying down tools to us, but they've needed coal to get through and keep the lights on.
Well, yeah, that exactly highlights the problem, Peter. They can talk about getting rid of coal. They can talk about keeping coal in the ground forever as much as they like, but there's no other alternative realistically to keeping the grid going in a country like Britain, even with other things they have like nuclear and gas, and certainly not in a place like Australia. Our coal doesn't just serve us here. It serves places like India. It serves places like China. And I note that these same officious university professors who are going around ordering Australia what to do with our coal and saying, no, 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 you must keep that in the ground, aren't going around to China. They aren't going around to India and saying, no, 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 you must stop buying that coal from China and stop your industrialization and stop your modernization. Because, of course, that's not what this is about at all. It is about hampering economies like Australia with this sort of, mantle of guilt, among other things, to hobble us. While European economies, keep in mind, they benefited during the whole thing when Eastern Europe's economies collapsed from all of that, so that their emissions wound up looking a lot lower. So, I think it's all a bit rich for these professors to go on like this.
Yeah, I've had enough of being lectured by the rest of the world about coal, given where we are in percentage terms of global emissions and all of that, Corey. And also, I said all the way through the top of the year when the free trade negotiations were underway, just watch Boris, or the girlfriend, now the wife. They'll be trying to ram in some Paris Agreement nasties in a trade agreement. We need to be on notice. That's what they're going to try to do because he wants to be a hero in Glasgow. Well, those emails turn up and I reckon I'm proven right.
Yeah, I reckon you are too, Peter. And I'm going to agree with you that we should compliment our government on their resistance to this sort of stuff. Because what we do know is that 100% of predictions about climate temperature, about dates where there is no return, about the use of fossil fuels have actually been proved wrong and incorrect. And this is another one. The statistics are actually just made up for alarmism reasons, for research purposes, to get more money to fuel it. None of them have been proved correct. Remember, Al Gore and others said we would be underwater or we wouldn't have any rain or the Earth only had 40 days left until we were all over the hill and ready to cook. This is alarmism. It is silly. And I think Australia needs to chart its own course to look after our interests because no one else in the world will.
No, this climate emperor has no clothes. Let's go to the United States. Joe Biden made yet another bizarre gaffe. Have a look at this.
You've educated me, you've brought me along, and you've always been there. Now, I'm supposed to stop and walk out of the room here. I'm going to stop, but with your permission, I'm going to walk into the room because I want to say hello to all. Thank you.
James.
I don't know, Peter. I'm supposed to sit here on the stool and talk to you down the camera. What is going on with this guy? Every time we look at Joe Biden, you know, he just seems to be getting worse and worse and worse. Something is wrong with this fellow. I don't know that he's got the capacity to keep being the president, quite frankly, when you keep seeing so many weird appearances like that. There was a report on Politico.com today, which also said that people in the White House staff and the Oval Office staff, they now hit mute when he comes on the TV in their office because they are terrified of what he is going to say. It just seems to be manifest that, you know, if you look at Joe Biden and his oratory over the last, year, 2 years versus 10 years ago, it's a very, very different person we're talking about. And we've got to start asking the same questions about him that would have been asked about Donald Trump in the same situation.
Absolutely right. Can you imagine what would be happening on the comedy channels, the nighttime shows, all of that, if this was a right-winger as opposed to a Democrat? I don't think he's well at all. And you're right, there's been a great significant decline in recent months. Corey, James Morrow, thank you for your time.